Let's stay on the story. I want to bring in Scott Clancy. He is a retired Major General in the Canadian Armed Forces, former Deputy Commander of the Alaskan NORAD region, and former Director of Operations for all NORAD in Colorado Springs. He joins us again from Cobourg, Ontario. Scott, appreciate you again taking the time tonight. So we heard from the U.S. President, Joe Biden, that the objects shot over North American skies are likely not used for spying. The Prime Minister says we just don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that both are true. The Prime Minister of Canada is saying that we don't exactly know. That's very true. What President Biden said is that there is nothing that specifically points these objects to the intelligence gathering of either China or any other nation. So in that sense, the intelligence community's leading theories are that they are commercial or otherwise research. And I think that that's on the balance of probabilities prudent to say and probably accurate.
So the search efforts for the shot down object over Lake Huron were suspended today due to low chance of recovery. So what do you make of that? Is this, it's only a few days later, the fact that they would just call off this search after a few days, is that surprising to you?
So, I heard that they suspended the search, and I think that there's two factors that always go into every single search. One is, yes, the terrain or the water. In this case, it's depth and all of the things around that. But let's not forget the risk to those people that are executing on that search. As the weather conditions worsen, and there's a low probability or lower and lower probability of being able to find anything based upon the depth and the currents and the small size of what that is as it goes down to those huge depths, then you don't want to cause more risk to any individuals while extending that search.
So I know your expertise is more the air than the water, right? So the Yukon search for the object continues. But what's your sense of where we are in that?
Well, I think it's much the same that any search and rescue would go to. It's an excruciating and painstaking, grid by grid search from the air, trying to ascertain where they think they could pinpoint that, and then to vector ground crews onto any suspicious places that they think it might be, or to keep on searching that wide expanse.
What do you make of some questions to the U.S. president over what about when the next object kind of comes into North American airspace? I mean, you were head of NORAD, right? I mean, you never blew these things. These things were never blown out of the sky when you were there. Is this something that we should expect to continue in the future, or is there going to be kind of a step back from that? And what about the risk to civilian aircraft?
So I think that what you see from NORAD was on each one, whether it's the first Chinese balloon or the other three devices, each one was treated with its individual merits and characteristics. And they were described to the authorities in either Canada or the United States. And based upon those characteristics and the risk, and then drawing in the fact that, one, it's not an immediate kinetic military risk, but that it poses a risk to the or a hazard to the safety of flight. That, to me, would have been the overarching factor to make a recommendation. To see from there onto the future, I go back to President Biden's comments. I mean, he made comments at the beginning talking about better policy parameters. These are really about adjusting the engagement parameters in order to distinguish between that which is risk from that which is not. But let's be clear, even of the smallest of those objects, if it had come in contact with a commercial airliner, would have caused catastrophic damage.
So that is interesting. So Biden says he expects to speak with China's President Xi Jinping about what the U.S. says was a Chinese spy balloon. That's from earlier in the month. How do you think that's going to affect the relationship between the U.S. and China?
Well, I think everything that President Biden said was measured and was the kind of policies and approach that I would see from a good international leader. I think it's a little bit of a playbook that Canada could pick up. One thing that I would pick up from President Biden's comments is this vocabulary that he used was not just specific to balloons or, to how he's going to engage President Xi in the future on this. It was also talking about unmanned vehicles. This broadens the category to something that those of us in NORAD have been speaking about for a while, which is unmanned aerial vehicles. trying to distinguish those and increase the capacity to detect that. It's going to take time and money. I think the real thing that President Biden could lead on in the world is rules and regulations on the launching and maintenance of aerial objects, to include UAVs and balloons. And this kind of global standard would be something that Canada could fall into, and the International Civil Aviation Organization in Montreal could assist with as well.
Scott, again, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Scott Clancy is a retired Major General in the Canadian Armed Forces, former Deputy Commander of the Alaskan NORAD region, and former Director of Operations for all NORAD in Colorado Springs. He joined us in Cobourg, Ontario.